Amid the scorching sands of a divided kingdom, a shadow grew silently. Absalom, the Prince of Israel, heir to a glorious legacy, yet also destined for tragedy. A man admired for his beauty, intelligence, and charisma. A beloved son, but also a feared one. How could someone so full of promise become the architect of his own household's downfall? What could drive a son to turn against his father, to the point of seeking to dethrone and destroy him? The answers to these questions reveal a tale woven with betrayal, pride, and unbridled ambition. Imagine a prince whose name echoed through Jerusalem as a symbol of hope, yet in secret, he was devising a sinister plan. Absalom's story is not just about a rebellious son. It is about a heart consumed by the thirst for power, about how the desire for vengeance can corrode even the most sacred bonds. Behind his enchanting face lay a restless spirit, willing to do anything to seize the throne. But what led him to this path? Was it an unforgivable offense, an absent father, or the insatiable temptation of ruling? Is power truly worth the price of a shattered family? While David, the great king, waged wars against external enemies, the real threat was growing within his own household. Absalom waited, watched, and plotted. Every calculated gesture, every sweet word whispered to the people was another step toward betrayal. And so one of the darkest dramas in Israel's history began to unfold. But why did the people of Israel allow themselves to be deceived? How did Absalom, with a charming smile and promises of justice, manage to capture the hearts of an entire nation? There is something deeper at play in this story, something beyond mere ambition. There are hidden lessons about pride, forgiveness, and the dangers of a hardened heart. Get ready to dive into a story full of twists and turns, marked by political strategies, bloody battles, and decisions that would change the fate of a kingdom. A story where every step toward the throne was also a step toward destruction. After all, will the betrayer eventually be betrayed? Can a man who ascends to power through deception truly rule? And when a father's love collides with a son's rebellion, what will be the ultimate outcome? If you want to uncover the secrets behind this gripping story and understand how pride can be a man's greatest enemy, keep watching. There is much more to Absalom's rebellion than meets the eye. And of course, if this narrative has captured your attention, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss a single detail of this epic journey. After all, this is not just the story of a prince. It is the story of the prince who destroyed his own house. Who was Absalom, the man who dared to challenge the most powerful king of Israel? Absalom was the third son of King David, born to Maacah, the daughter of the king of Geshur. From an early age, he was surrounded by admiration and prestige. His beauty was legendary. The scriptures declare that there was no man in all of Israel as praised for his appearance as he was. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, he was without blemish. His long, thick hair, which he cut only once a year because it became excessively heavy, symbolized more than vanity. It represented pride, power, and a fate that would ultimately lead to his downfall. But Absalom was more than just good looks. He possessed an irresistible charisma, capable of captivating anyone with his sweet words and commanding presence. Absalom knew how to be the center of attention. He had a natural talent for leadership and was adored by the people. But what few realized was the burning flame of ambition within him. Behind his charming smile lay a restless, wounded spirit driven by the thirst for vengeance and power. The people saw him as the perfect prince, someone who, in the eyes of many, would be the ideal king. But what made him so dangerous? It was precisely that lethal combination of charisma and ambition. Absalom did not merely want to be loved, he craved the throne. And to claim it, he was willing to walk a path paved with deception and betrayal. The people's fascination with Absalom was understandable. As David aged and the kingdom seemed in need of renewal, Absalom presented himself as the promise of a bright future. He was a figure who inspired confidence and hope, a young, handsome and eloquent leader. But his apparent kindness was a carefully crafted mask. He knew how to manipulate the emotions of the people, portraying himself as the defender of justice, while secretly orchestrating a treacherous plan to usurp his own father's throne. Absalom understood the power of appearing close to the people, always ready to listen to their grievances and promise solutions. This strategic posture allowed him to win the hearts of Israel, setting the stage for the greatest betrayal in the kingdom's history. But what truly fueled Absalom? The answer lies in a dark episode of his life, the tragedy involving his sister Tamar and his half-brother Amnon. David the king remained silent in the face of a brutal crime committed within his own household. This royal inaction planted the seed of vengeance within Absalom, and from that wound, his ambition became uncontrollable. He began to see the throne not just as a symbol of power, but as a means to correct what he perceived as an unforgivable injustice. In his mind, becoming king was the only way to restore his family's honor. However, the desire for justice quickly merged with pride and an insatiable thirst for dominance. Absalom, the most handsome and admired prince of Israel, was slowly transforming into a dangerous man. His hunger for power grew with each passing day, and his ability to manipulate the people made him a formidable adversary. But what Absalom failed to realize was that his own journey toward power was paved with the same sins and mistakes he so strongly condemned. With every step toward the throne, he drifted further from what he truly desired, the love and acceptance of his father. Thus, the charming prince of Israel was becoming the architect of his own tragedy. What turns a beloved prince into a relentless enemy? For Absalom, the point of no return was a deep, unhealed family wound. Tamar, his beloved sister, became the victim of a heinous crime committed by Amnon, David's firstborn and rightful heir to the throne. Consumed by a twisted obsession, Amnon violated Tamar and then cast her aside with contempt. This act not only destroyed Tamar's honor, but also tore a deep wound in Absalom's soul. And what did David do in the face of such a tragedy? Silence. The king, known for his justice, failed his own daughter. This inaction was the spark that ignited within Absalom a burning desire for vengeance, one that would soon evolve into something even darker. For 2 years, Absalom patiently nurtured his revenge. He hid his fury behind a calm and calculating demeanor. No words of hatred, no rash actions, just the cold, silent planning of someone preparing for something greater. Then, the day of reckoning arrived. At a banquet arranged by Absalom, Amnon was assassinated, a precise, calculated and merciless strike. With this act, Absalom eliminated the direct heir to the throne and avenged his sister. But this was not merely an act of brotherly justice, it was also the first step toward power. With Amnon out of the way, the line of succession was disrupted. Absalom knew that now, more than ever, the throne was within his reach. After the murder, Absalom fled to Geshur, the land of his maternal grandfather. There, he remained in exile for 3 long years. But unlike a fugitive running from justice, Absalom used this time to strengthen his alliances and refine his strategy. His exile was not a punishment, it was preparation. Absalom knew that one day he would return to Jerusalem, and when that day came, he would not return as a remorseful prince, but as a leader ready to seize what he believed was rightfully his. But what was going through David's heart during this time? The king mourned Amnon's death, yet he also longed for Absalom, a father torn between love and disappointment. Absalom's return to Jerusalem was a quiet yet significant event. David, under pressure from Joab, allowed his son to return, but refused to see him for 2 years. This emotional distance was the final push that cemented Absalom's rebellion. His father's rejection only fueled his desire to take the throne. If David would not acknowledge him as a son, then Absalom would present himself to the people as the king Israel deserved. And so, the wounded prince began to orchestrate the greatest betrayal Jerusalem had ever witnessed. This chapter reveals more than just a power struggle. It exposes the complexity of family relationships and the devastating consequences of silence and pride. David's inaction came at a great cost, and Absalom's thirst for vengeance paved the way for a rebellion that would shake the foundations of the kingdom. After all, when the desire for justice becomes entangled with unchecked ambition, what can stop the impending tragedy? Absalom's return to Jerusalem was not met with celebration, but with the cold indifference of a father who refused to see him. Yet for Absalom, David's rejection was not a setback, it was fuel for his ambition. He understood that the throne would not be won merely by blood right, but by the will of the people. And for that, he would wield the most powerful weapon in his arsenal, his charisma. Absalom did not need his father's approval as long as he could win the hearts of Israel. Thus, he began a silent yet masterfully orchestrated campaign where every word, every gesture, every public appearance was carefully designed to build his image as the leader the people deserved. Each day, Absalom positioned himself at the city gate, where citizens came to present their grievances before the king. He greeted them warmly, listened to their stories and frustrations, and with a persuasive tone declared, "Oh, if only I were made judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." With honeyed words and a feigned empathy, he presented himself as the answer to a government that, according to him, had grown distant and negligent. It was a subtle, yet devastatingly effective strategy. Absalom did not openly attack his father. Instead, he positioned himself as the better alternative, a leader who was close, accessible, and just. While David remained withdrawn, perhaps still dealing with the wounds of his past, Absalom embedded himself among the people. He embraced the poor, listened to the outcasts, and promised a brighter future. Each interaction reinforced the image of a ruler who genuinely cared, someone who would finally bring justice and prosperity to Israel. The people, weary of David's seeming detachment and captivated by Absalom's charm, began to believe in this illusion. The handsome and charismatic prince was becoming, in the eyes of the nation, the king Israel truly needed. But behind this facade of kindness lurked a carefully orchestrated plot to overthrow his own father. Absalom's psychological warfare was so effective because he did not attempt to seize power by force, at least not at first. He knew that public support was essential. His manipulation was his weapon, and slowly but surely he achieved what he desired, the hearts of Israel's men. The people began to wonder, why not Absalom? After all, he seemed to care, he listened, he understood. Absalom had masterfully created the perfect setting for his betrayal, one where the people themselves longed for his leadership, unaware that they were being played. Absalom's rise to power holds a timeless lesson. Power is not always taken by force. Often it is won with the right words, spoken at the right time. He knew precisely how to exploit the cracks in David's rule, offering empty promises wrapped in a seductive narrative. But would the people's support be enough? How would Absalom turn this popularity into absolute power? The prince's next move would reveal just how far he was willing to go to claim the throne, and the consequences of that ambition would be devastating. With the hearts of the people already in his hands, Absalom was ready to take the next and most daring step, the seizure of the throne. Manipulation had only been the beginning. Now, he needed a grand act that would solidify his power and proclaim his ascension to the world. For this, he chose Hebron, a location of profound historical significance. Hebron was not just David's former capital, it was the place where David's reign had begun. Absalom knew that crowning himself there would be a symbolic blow, a clear message. The throne was changing hands, and the new king would be him. His strategy was subtle, yet treacherous. Absalom asked David for permission to go to Hebron under the pretext of fulfilling a religious vow. It was a brilliant move, as it made him appear obedient and devout, eliminating any suspicion of betrayal. David, perhaps blinded by fatherly love or overly confident in his position, granted him permission. But Absalom had a much darker purpose. Upon arriving in Hebron, he sent messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel with a single proclamation: Absalom reigns in Hebron. The rebellion had stepped out of the shadows and into the open. The prince had now declared himself king, and the people, seduced by his promises, followed him blindly. The coup was swift and devastating. Absalom did not merely declare himself king, he organized a powerful political and military movement. With the backing of influential men and skilled generals, his strength grew daily. Even Ahithophel, David's trusted counselor and one of the wisest men in Israel, defected to Absalom's side. This betrayal was a severe blow to David, proving that the rebellion had not only popular support, but also the strategic intelligence necessary for success. Realizing the gravity of the situation, David was forced to make an unexpected and heartbreaking decision. He fled. David, the man who had defeated giants and unified Israel, was now abandoning Jerusalem. His flight was not just a strategic retreat, it was an act of profound sorrow. Imagine the weight of that moment. A king leaving his throne, his palace, and the holy city, not before a foreign enemy, but before his own son. The pain of this betrayal echoed in every step he took. For Absalom, this initial victory seemed like the pinnacle of his rise. He had achieved what he desired. The throne was vacant and Jerusalem was vulnerable. But behind this apparent triumph, a much darker battle was about to begin. Absalom's coronation in Hebron marked the moment when the rebellion turned from a whisper into a roar. But the story was far from over. A throne won through manipulation and betrayal. Could it truly be kept? David, even in exile, remained a chosen and battle-hardened king. And Absalom's fate, built upon ambition and deceit, was anything but secure. From that moment on, father and son were on a collision course. A civil war was looming, and the consequences would be devastating for the entire nation. Absalom's rebellion had reached the point of no return. Father and son now stood on opposite sides of a conflict that threatened to tear Israel apart. But David, even in exile, was not a defeated king. With the experience of a warrior who had faced giants and powerful armies, he reorganized his troops. A civil war was about to erupt, and the battlefield would be the dark and treacherous Forest of Ephraim, a place filled with dense terrain, hidden dangers, and natural traps. This was where Absalom's fate would be sealed. David's army was divided into 3 divisions, led by Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. The king, torn between duty and love, wanted to lead the battle himself, but his men persuaded him to stay behind. Before they marched, David made one final heartfelt request: "Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom." These words echoed through the ranks, a clear reminder that despite everything, David still loved the son who had betrayed him. But the battlefield is ruthless, and destiny does not spare those with divided hearts. The battle in the forest was fierce and brutally one-sided. Absalom's forces were large in number, but they lacked the discipline and strategy that David's seasoned warriors possessed. The treacherous terrain worked against them. More of Absalom's men perished to the forest itself than to the sword. Thick branches, narrow paths, and natural ambush points devastated the rebel troops. It was chaos. And in the midst of this carnage, Absalom, mounted on his royal mule, faced the most tragic moment of his life. As he fled, his long, flowing hair, the symbol of his pride and beauty, became his downfall. While riding beneath a large oak tree, his thick hair became entangled in its branches, leaving him suspended in mid-air. His mule kept running, leaving him hanging helplessly between heaven and earth. The irony was cruel. The very thing that had made Absalom stand out, his prideful hair, had now turned into his own trap of humiliation and death. The prince who once walked among the people as their hero now swung powerless and alone, caught in the grip of fate. There, dangling between life and death, Absalom was completely vulnerable. As David's army advanced, news of his capture quickly reached Joab's ears. Now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Would Joab obey the king's command and spare the young traitor? Or would he end the rebellion with a final, decisive strike? The next move would not only determine the fate of Absalom, but also the final devastating chapter in the tragic story of a father and his son. Hanging by his hair, suspended between heaven and earth, Absalom faced the most vulnerable moment of his life. The prince who had once captivated the hearts of the people now swung helplessly, betrayed by the very symbol of his pride. At that moment, the rebellion that had set Israel ablaze reached its climax. When Joab, the ruthless commander of David's army, learned of Absalom's capture, he made a decision that would change the course of history. Joab did not hesitate. To him, the rebellion would only end with the traitor's death. David's plea for mercy meant nothing to him. Upon finding Absalom still trapped in the tree, Joab ignored the king's orders. With the cold precision of a battle-hardened warrior, he took 3 javelins and drove them into the heart of the prince. Absalom's life slowly faded. Even as he gasped for breath, Joab's men surrounded him and mercilessly struck the final blows. And so, the life of the man who dared to challenge both his father and his king came to a brutal end. Absalom, the handsome and charismatic prince, met his fate not on a throne, but among the tangled branches of a tree, defeated by his own arrogance. The news of Absalom's death reached David like a crushing blow. A king who had conquered so much in his lifetime now faced his greatest loss. When he heard of his son's fate, David was consumed by overwhelming grief. He climbed to the room above the city gate and wept bitterly. His words rang out with the pain of a shattered heart. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." David's lament was not just for the son he lost, but for the broken relationship, the wrong choices, and the missed opportunities. In that moment, David was not just a king, he was a grieving father. Despite the betrayal, the war, and the pain Absalom had caused, David's love for his son never wavered. He did not mourn the death of an enemy. He mourned the loss of his child. His sorrow echoed throughout history as a haunting reminder that power, pride, and ambition often come at a devastating cost. David's grief was so overwhelming that his victorious army, which had returned in triumph, felt ashamed. Instead of celebrating, they entered the city in silence, as if they had lost the war. Absalom's tragic end serves as a powerful lesson. The relentless pursuit of power can lead to destruction, even for the most gifted and admired. And for David, his military victory was, in reality, a deeply personal defeat. The shattered bond between father and son, the death that could have been prevented, and the grief that would never fade became the bitter legacy of a rebellion that began with pride and ended in tears. The story of Absalom echoes like a dark whisper through the centuries. A prince who had everything, beauty, charisma, power, and the admiration of the people, yet he was consumed by his relentless desire to rule at any cost. His journey forces us to reflect on the consequences of unchecked pride and ambition. Absalom believed that the throne would heal his wounds and justify his resentment, but in the end, it was this very obsession that led him to destruction. His hair, his symbol of vanity, became the instrument of his death. A tragic irony that reminds us how our greatest gifts can turn into our worst traps. But Absalom's story is not just about betrayal and power. More than anything, it is a story of the pain of withheld forgiveness and wasted love. David, a powerful king, was also a flawed father. His failure to address the tragedies in his own household, his silence in the face of Amnon's crime, and his coldness toward Absalom's return all paved the way for rebellion. Perhaps, if David had confronted these wounds earlier, the outcome could have been different, but the choices were made and the consequences were inevitable. His desperate cries for his lost son reveal that no throne, no crown is worth more than love and reconciliation. The legacy of Absalom serves as a warning about the dangers of manipulation and selfish ambition. He captured the hearts of the people with sweet words and empty promises, but he could not hold on to his position. A kingdom built on betrayal and deception cannot last. Sooner or later, truth prevails, and the price of ambition is paid in full. Absalom thought he could surpass David, but he never understood that true leadership is not about power. It is about loyalty, character, and above all, love. And so Absalom's rebellion ends, leaving behind profound lessons. How far are we willing to go to satisfy our ambitions? What are we willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of power? The story of Absalom and David reminds us that pride may lift us up, but it can also cause the most painful downfall. Love and forgiveness, often neglected, are sometimes the only bridges capable of preventing irreversible tragedies. David's cry still echoes, my son Absalom," a lament that makes us reflect on our own relationships, choices, and priorities. If this story moved you as much as it moved us in telling it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments what you learned from Absalom's tragic journey. After all, stories like this teach us that power can be seductive, but pride can be fatal. And you, which path would you choose? The path of pride or the path of reconciliation?